Well, this is our last video. I know it's sad you guys like listening to me so much, but it is our last video for the review sessions. It's on statistics. Statistics, measures of central tendency are the big deal. Most of this stuff is going to be review on how to get things on your graphing calculator. So it's going to be really important maybe that you have your graphing calculator so you can kind of practice and try to get the screens that are going to be shown. First of all, measures of central tendency are mean, median, and mode. The mean is the average. Remember, the mean teacher gives you the average. And you add and divide. The median is the middle value. Please remember, though, when you have a middle value, it is when the numbers are in order. And then the mode is the one that shows up the most common that's in the list of data. A box plot is literally a box, and they used to call it box and whiskers back in the olden days, you know. And so this box represents several pieces of very important information. This would be denoted by a dot. This is the minimum value. The lower quartile, or quartile 1, is the first side of the box. The median is the line that's in the middle of the box. And the upper quartile, or quartile 3, is the second part of the box. And then the last dot that you see would be the maximum value. Interquartile range is the distance, or the difference, between the lower quartile, or quartile 1, and the upper quartile, or quartile 3. Very important that you recognize all that. A dot plot, I just wanted to show you what a dot plot looks like, or remind you what it looks like. We don't necessarily do a lot with these, but it is convenient if we're trying to put numbers in order. And then a scatter plot always has an X and a Y axis labeled, and it's just dots randomly placed. If it looks like there's a line of regression or a line of best fit that's kind of going in a downward motion, like a negative slope, it has a negative correlation or a negative relationship. And right here, this would have a positive relationship because it starts low and looks like a positive slope. Again, pause the video to take some time and make some of these notes in your vocab notebook. And then we're going to continue talking about different vocabulary words for statistics. A correlation coefficient means how close to a straight line is the scatter plot. In this case, the correlation coefficient is a positive 0.4. It's a positive slope, but 0.4 is not a very strong linear relationship. You can see that there's quite a few dots that are fairly far away from that line. The closer you are to 1, the better the fit. So if this was 0.9 or 0.95, this would be real close to a straight line. The dots would be very, very close to that line of best fit. This is a correlation that there's no relationship whatsoever. You can't tell if it's going positive or negative, so it's called a no correlation coefficient, or 0. The R value here, or the correlation coefficient, is a negative slope. Again, this is fairly far away from -1, which means that you can tell that there's sort of a relationship, sort of a pattern, but it's not necessarily really strong linear, because there's so many dots that are far away from that line. If all the dots were more hugged around that, it would be closer to a -1, like a -0.98 or something like that. I mentioned line of regression or line of best fit. So the scatter plot would be these dots that are on here. The line of best fit is where it kind of falls in between all of these dots, sort of evenly. And then we talked about this earlier in our preview, and then we've continued it. But when we have this, I'm not very good at drawing my lines again, but how far away from those points to the line is the error? It's also called the residual. We've actually plotted a residual plot without even knowing what it was. If you remember, several weeks ago we did that, and you could plot that very nicely. It's the error in which the line of best fit falls between all of these dots. The last set of vocabulary words that we've discussed deal with frequency, relative frequency. Relative frequency is in percent. So right here, this is a decimal, but this would be really 9% of the people that were surveyed here are male that have a sport utility vehicle. So this would be 56% are females with a sports utility vehicle, and so on and so forth. So this is a relative frequency where you're using the total of all of the people surveyed, or all of the things that you're talking about. In this particular case, we're not talking about the whole thing. We're talking about conditional. So in this case, there are 156 sport utility vehicles. That's the bottom number. 21 and 35 create that 156. So this row total, this column total adds up to 156. These are conditional because you're only dealing with either a column or a row of total, not the whole thing, such as over here. So be cautious with the wording if it says relative frequency or conditional relative frequency. And you might also hear that as marginal relative frequency. So there's relative frequency, and then let's see if I can come over here and just throw in this word. It's either conditional or marginal relative frequency. It tells you that you're not using the bottom total, rather you're using the total from the columns or the rows. Now, the INSPIRE processes, there's a lot of them. Please remember, if you want to draw a scatter plot, if you want to have a scatter plot on your graphing calculator, you take your Listen Spreadsheets. Your Listen Spreadsheets icon is right there, the fourth one as you're moving right. You do your Listen Spreadsheets and you will get your columns. Now, sometimes there's only one variable, sometimes there's two, but in this particular case, it's just showing an example. No matter which one, if it's a 1 or 2 variable set of data, you have to title it. Remember to title it. When you enter your data, you're going to get the option, you can put it on a scatter plot. You want to go home, you want to hit your data and statistics icon. The data and statistics icon is right here. It's right here on your home page. And you want to make your list. Scatter plots will always be from bivariate data. And so you want to make sure to name your lists, click OK, and it will give you your nice scatter plot. Now, we can do linear regression from the scatter plot. That's going down to this part right here. If we were at this page, you could click Menu. You want to click Menu first, and then you would click number 4, Analyze Graph, and you could come and you could choose the regression. And there's a whole bunch of regressions that you could choose. Linear is the most popular, but we do work with quadratic right here, and we do work with exponential. Most of the other ones we don't work with. So it's either going to be linear, quadratic, or exponential. Most of the times it's going to be linear. The line of best fit would fall somewhere right here. You can get to regression from your list page. So if you were at this page right here and you wanted to get to a regression, you would again click Menu. You would go to Statistics and Stat Calculations. Now this Stat Calculations takes us to something that we're going to get to in just a minute. But if you want regression, you could actually get the regression right there. It's just not going to give you the actual picture. It's only going to give you the M and the B, and you can create your own equation. Most of the time, we go from the scatter plot to the line of best fit by using regression, but certainly you can skip over the scatter plot step and go right from the list to the regression. You just have to create your own equation. You also use this same exact step process from the list to get your mean, your median, and your correlation coefficient. So again, we have our lists. It's going to be usually 2 lists, but you can certainly have 1. You choose menu and you go statistics, stat calculations, and it gives you all of these variables. Whether you choose one or two variables, if you choose one variable, you'll be able to get your mean and your standard deviation. If you choose two variable statistics, you can get the correlation coefficient. Also, with either one of these, you can get your minimum value, your quartile 1, your median, your quartile 3, and your max. So these steps are all that you can take on the Inspire calculator. So again, the regression and getting to the mean, the median, and the quartiles, etc., all of these follow the same first two steps. You go to lists and spreadsheets, you go to for and stat calculations. What happens after that is up to you. Usually we're going to use these three, but of course we already talked about the fact that we might use the quadratic regression and we might use exponential regression. But again, you'd have to create your own equation if you don't have the scatter plot in front of you. That takes up our last review session. Thanks so much for your time, and we are out of here.